But first, I'm not naive. I know all governments spend our taxes to get re-elected, and a lot, well, all of them really, spend it on political rorts quite often for votes. We all know that. But one thing particularly infuriates me about the Morrison government's sports rorts scandal, and it's this: the thought that the government has treated hundreds and maybe thousands of volunteers around the country with contempt. Now, I'm talking about volunteers, you know, the mums and the dads and the coaches and the administrators in sports clubs around Australia who thought that their government would play by the rules. Volunteers who spent hours and hours working on applications for grants for their clubs from the Community Sport Infrastructure Program. Now, these people thought that the sports minister in charge of this scheme, Bridget McKenzie, really did want to help the most deserving clubs get a break. Take the Coaldale Waves Soccer Club. It had 10 volunteers work for 200 hours on its plan to get more women playing and to level its ground. So one of the volunteers, Lisa Miller, said the ground was so uneven that the club had about 14 major injuries in 2 years. The Kyneton Soccer Club, the Kyneton District Soccer Club, had 4 people work for 100 hours to argue for money to upgrade its pitch, which is sometimes too rough to play on. And the club made a very good argument. In fact, Sport Australia, which assessed all 2,000 applications for these grants, rated that Kyneton club, that grant, 87 out of 100. And when clubs needed to get a minimum of 74 to get a grant, so that's pretty good. And the Gippsland Rangers Roller Derby, that made an even stronger case. It's tried very hard to be welcoming to gays and lesbians. And Sport Australia said its application was just about perfect, 98 out of 100. Can't get much better. Now, all these volunteers were doing their very best for their players and for their communities. But what they didn't realise, until now, was that Sports Minister Bridget McKenzie wasn't playing fair. She looked at their applications, even that near-perfect one, and chucked them all in the bin. Not one of those clubs, or another 47 whose applications were rated 83 or higher by Sport Australia, not one of them got a cent from McKenzie. You see, what none of them knew was that they'd been played for suckers. As I've since learned from leaks and an inquiry by the Auditor General, McKenzie didn't much care about their outreach programs or their busted change rooms or even their busted ankles and twisted knees. What she cared about was how they'd help the government win the election. So in her office, McKenzie and her staff listed all those applications on a spreadsheet with colour coding so they could tell which came from government seats they needed to save and Labor seats they thought they could hold. Red and green and blue and, oh, you can see it all there. So, bad luck. The Gippsland Rangers Roller Derby. The club's application may have been near perfect, 98, but that club is in the safe national seat of Gippsland, which the government was never going to lose. So why would McKenzie waste the money helping that club? And bad luck too, the Coaldale Waves Soccer Club and the Kyneton District Soccer Club, they were both in safe Labor seats. No votes there for the government. Now, McKenzie has offered the dumbest defence I've heard for a while, to deny that she had pure politics on her mind when deciding which club to reward.
Well, if anything, Tim, there's a case of reverse pork barrelling going on. So if you look at the intervention that my decisions as Minister made to the projects that were actually delivered on, originally there was something like 26% of those projects recommended were heading into Labor Party electorates. The reality is, thanks to my decision-making as Minister, 34% of the projects delivered went into Labor Party electorates.
You don't say, Minister. A whole third of the grants went to Labor when it actually held nearly half the seats. Half? That's McKenzie just confirming the rort. And which of those non-government seats did she so kindly fund? Well, many, in fact, were the seats the government was trying to win, the marginal seats like Mayo, where Liberal candidate Georgina Downer was allowed by McKenzie to present a big cheque with her own picture on it, just to remind voters who was being nice to them. In fact, half the money in McKenzie's first round of these grants went to clubs in marginal seats that the government hoped to win. Half of them. And that's because Bridget McKenzie effectively tore up the list that Sport Australia had given her of the most deserving clubs based on need. And so by the third round of these grants, McKenzie was so off the leash that, as the Auditor General said, 73% of the grants she was handing out had not been recommended by Sport Australia. And the clubs that missed out, well, they're now wondering whether the government just ripped them off. Clubs like the Castlemaine Bowling Club.
Say the club, me personally, but the club were extremely disappointing to miss out on those funds because it was going to offer so much for our community.
The Prime Minister today tried to brush this all away.
Are you suggesting that there was nothing wrong as a matter of principle in using public funds for your own private political interests and the entrenchment of your government's power?
Well, I just reject the premise of the question. That's not why we did it.
So why did you do it?
To support local communities and the sporting infrastructure that they need to bond together, to be cohesive and ensure that girls didn't have to change out the back of the shed.
If you believe that, you really do deserve to be ripped off. Now look, like I said, you can tell me that all governments pork barrel, and they do, but there's something extra shameful this time around. And it's not just that McKenzie went on a spending spree that may not even been lawful. The Auditor General even warned, it is not evident, he said, what the legal authority was. Now, as I said, what really infuriates me is that Sports Minister Bridget McKenzie treated so many volunteers, the best of us, as fools and deliberately wasted their time in a rorted game. That's how you trash public respect for government. That's how you make even good people dangerously cynical. It's how you teach children in all those sporting clubs that playing fair, that's for losers. Got to ask, why doesn't Bridget McKenzie resign now before she's sacked?